Hello and welcome to Dan Explains. I'm Dan. I hope you're enjoying the Easter season. It's been Lent, so my last few videos have been faith focused, but I've got a science centered video for you this week. Actually, no, it's more of a conjecture centered video, but it's conjecture about scientific theories. Have you ever heard of Gall's law? It states all complex systems that work evolved from simpler systems that worked. Basically, everything, life, galaxies, the stars, arise from simpler systems. A good analogy is Lego bricks. With just a few brick shapes, you can make everything from a skyscraper to a cricket. However, if string theory, or more generally, M theory, is to be believed, physics flagrantly breaks Gall's law, and it has the gall to... What was that? And it has the gall to not... and doesn't care to show up to court to defend itself. Why would our simple three-dimensional universe arise from the seemingly more complex 10 or whatever dimensions predicted by M theory? And if your response to that statement is, it doesn't, because you have a doctorate in armchair cosmology from the Trussell Book Trailer Park University, please suspend your disbelief for a little while and let's assume M theory is correct. Anyway, until recently, I think it's always pretty much been the assumption of physicists that complex things arise from simpler things. And it certainly seemed that way until around the early 1900s. Instead of trying to figure the last 100 years out from the top down like physicists have traditionally been doing, let's take a page from Gall's law and start with a simple question. What is the most likely universe? And following that, is that the universe we find ourselves in? And can we use logic to answer those two questions so we can attack the complexity of modern theoretical physics from the other end of the shooting range? I think so. Let me explain why. Before I get into it, I'd like to mention I've been trying to make my videos shorter recently. It seems to help with the algorithms. In light of that, I'll be trying to break the topics down into different videos rather than one giant horse pill YouTube doesn't have a big enough throat to swallow. Maybe at some point I'll go back to longer videos if I start getting some Patreons, or, of course, if the algorithms change to favor longer videos. So what is the most likely universe? The answer to this question is hinted at with the biggest question in science that science can't answer. Why is there something instead of nothing? Because logically speaking, the most likely universe is the one that doesn't exist at all. If you think about it, there are an infinite number of universes that don't exist out there. God making everything from nothing aside, we're clearly not in the most probable universe, because I wouldn't have been sitting there pondering this question if we were. So, what's the next most probable one? You know, the one that actually exists? One day, I was pondering this when it dawned on me that the next most probable universe was the one that was infinite in every way. I'm not just talking about space here. I'm talking about dimensions and an infinite number of physical phenomena too. A universe like that only needs one ingredient to make literally everything: itself. With an infinite universe, you can have your cake and eat it too. You can have just one ingredient arranged in an infinite number of different ways, similar to my Lego brick analogy. And at least with an infinite universe, anything could happen rather than nothing. The question then becomes, what does a universe like that look like? And how do you get from there to the one we apparently have? Those questions are a whole nother video in themselves. So I'll cover them in another video. So if you haven't dinged the bell and subscribed to my channel, please do so if you're interested in that. Today let's talk about the evidence that this may well be the universe we live in. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, for most of history, the explanation people found for pretty much all the phenomena we perceive in this world boiled down to simpler systems and rules. Think about the cell, for instance, which makes up almost all complex organisms like ourselves. Eukaryotic cells mirror complex organisms on a much smaller scale, but are much simpler than us. They have a cell membrane like we have skin. They have aptly named organelles, which are like our organs. The parts of the cell that are like the cell of the cell are enzymes and proteins. I'm a molecular biologist, so yes, I'm aware that statement was a wee bit redundant. Anyway, like our cells in our bodies, proteins are the units of the cell which cooperate to make the whole cell into an organism. Going a step further down, proteins have domains, which have functions similar to organs and organelles, although they're even simpler. Simple enough, in fact, that modern supercomputers can be used to simulate proteins and enzymes to figure out what their function is and how they are created and work. At the level of the protein, molecules act like the building blocks, similar to how cells are the building blocks of our body. Molecules, of course, have groups, which are even simpler than domains. Molecules are made of even simpler atoms, and even though there are an infinite variety of molecules out there, there are only 80 stable atoms, aka elements, with maybe a few not so stable but still very long-lived radioactive elements in there. So everything we know of is built of these 80 elements. It gets even simpler. Atoms are made of just 3 things: protons, neutrons, and electrons. This is where we were at with physics at the turn of the 20th century, and that's where things start to get complicated. Now, you could argue things get a bit simpler because there are many unstable particles related to protons and neutrons and electrons, and with the exception of the electron and its family of particles, which are thought to be primary, protons and neutrons and all their relatives can be broken down to just quarks. But these quarks require a zoo of force particles to make them work. That's pretty much the end of the line for simplicity. Explanations, even if they do prove to be correct, start getting more complicated. The cosmic strings of string theory, for instance, was an attempt to simplify things down to just one ingredient: vibrating strings. But to explain them, you need to make physics even more complex by adding a bunch of extra mini dimensions to explain their behavior. To make matters worse, there are so many ways these strings can vibrate in these hypothetical universes, it took string theorists a long time to figure out how many extra hidden dimensions the universe has. Then along came M-theory, which sort of fixed the problem by saying, "You're all right," not really making anything simpler and just resolving some of the conflicts between the different string theories. Of course, what I'm getting at here is after a point, physics doesn't get any simpler. It gets more complicated, kind of following a curve of complexity. In light of that, I think the increase in complexity, the smaller you get, points to the universe we have arising from an infinite one rather than a simpler one. Although it's hard to explain how, no matter how many layers of the onion you peel back, it never reaches infinite in everything. In fact, you could argue it's the same as trying to get something from nothing, because how you get from the infinite to the finite mathematically is often a harder question to answer than how to get from nothing to something. But that's a story for another video. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please press the like button. Subscribe to my channel and ding the bell to get notified when I post new videos. Also, please support me on Patreon, link in the description. The more people who support me, the more time I can dedicate to making videos like this one. So, until next time, have a great week.